各位同事，我哋夠人數亦。
We have a quorum. It's the appointed time. I call the meeting to order. This is a subcommittee on amendments to regulations under the Electoral Affairs Commission Ordinance (EAC). Let's invite the administration to come in to join us.
今日出席會議嘅呢就。
We have with us today Undersecretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, Mr. Andy Chan, Principal Assistant Secretary for CMA, Ms. Helen Chung, Chief Electoral Officer, Registration and Electoral Office, Mr. Wong Si-man, Principal Electoral Officer of the REO, Ms. Candy Ma, and Senior Government Counsel from the Department of Justice, Mr. Henry Chan. Perhaps let's hear from the Undersecretary, Mr. Andy Chan. He will take us through this the LegCo brief. Thank you. The EAC has conducted a report on the 2016 LegCo general election. And in October, they published the report, and in January last year, and January this year we came to the LegCo to seek members' views. Please speak closer to the microphone. Oh, sorry. The EAC conducted a review and published a report on the 2016 LegCo general election. They have made some recommendations. In short, it is quite simple, just to make clear our conventional practice. That is, well, once a voter has registered, the name will appear in the final register. At the time of the on the day of voting, the voter will have to produce identity document to prove that he or she is the voter on the final register. Usually people will produce their ID card, and the presiding officer will check whether the person showing the identity document is actually the person appearing on the final register. And if they are satisfied that that is the case, then a ballot paper will be issued. Well, apart from producing one's identity card, the person may produce any other document bearing name and photograph of that person. However, it may give rise to misunderstanding that any kind of identity document is acceptable. In the report of the 2016 LegCo general election, it is pointed out that some voters have the misunderstanding that they don't need to produce the identity card as long as they bring some kind of identity document. Say, for example, a photocopy of the ID card. Actually, it is not allowed to just appear with your with a copy of your identity card when you cast your vote. On the 25th of January this year, we have sought the view of the Constitutional Affairs panel. Members don't oppose to the recommendation of the EAC, that is to make clear that producing merely one's the photocopy of their identity card is acceptable. It is made clear that the original copy of the identity card will have to be produced, and in case that someone has lost the identity card, there are alternative arrangements put in place. There are 4 of these alternatives. First, the application form of a replacement of your identity card, whether it is in case of a loss or damage or change of personal particular. The Immigration Department will issue an acknowledgement of application. The voter may produce the original of this acknowledgement in lieu of one's identity card. The second is the Hong Kong SAR passport bearing one's identity card number. There is also DI, that is document of identity. Someone who is not eligible for to apply for Hong Kong SAR may produce this to prove their identity. There is also one more type, Seaman's Identity Book. There aren't too many people holding the Seaman's Identity Book. It is, however, a valid travel document bearing one's name, photograph, and ID number. We have talked to lawyers and the immigration. It will be safer to include this. Well, one doesn't have to produce these alternative documents if they produce the original of the Hong Kong ID card. So there are 4 alternative arrangements. There is also one. Well, the Immigration Department doesn't open during public holidays. And if someone loses the ID card on a public holiday, one may go to make a report to the police. Then a document evidencing a report to a police of the loss or destruction of the identity card together with the original of a valid passport or similar travel document or the home return permit may use that to prove their identity before they obtained a ballot paper. That is the general arrangements for electors, and in relation to those detained, we have kept the existing arrangement. Well, for an inmate, their ID card may be kept by the Correctional Services Department. However, inmates may be issued with a tag. It will be quite easy for inmates to cast their vote in a prison, because if they forget to bring their tag, they can simply go back to get it. Members of the panel did not express any objection. And in June, the bill was introduced to the LegCo. We hope that it will come into effect on the 1st of October this year. After that, the EAC will, during elections, mount publicity campaign to remind voters to bring the original of the ID card. Well, under the law, an adult will have to bear his or her identity card when they go out. So it will be a habit for people to have their identity card with them. It's just that in case they have lost it, misplaced it, then the alternative arrangements will kick in. Say, for example, when someone can't make it to the Immigration Department to apply for replacement of their identity card, then you can use a document issued by the police evidencing a report of loss. We want to facilitate voting and at the same time try to reduce dispute related to the production of identity documents. We don't want people to in any way perceive it to be unfair. We want to maintain the perception of the public that elections are fair and clean. And that is the end of my introduction. I will be happy to take questions. Thank you. Well, let's see if members have any questions. We have 3 members waiting to ask questions. Jeffrey Lam, Lam Check Ting, Yu Si Wing, Holden Chow. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you. I support the proposed legislative amendment. I think it is long due because the law requires Hong Kong citizens to bring with them a valid Hong Kong ID card with them when they go out, and there's always been a dispute when it comes to a photocopy of the identity card. In relation to paragraph 7A, 5, it says that someone may have lost one's identity card. Then one can use a photocopy together with another proof of identity, say for example passport with them. What about, well, the particulars appearing on on the foreign passport may be different. Say for example Chan Thai Man Peter, it may appear differently. Say for example Thai Man Peter Chan, or Peter Chan Thai Man, or Thai Man Peter Chan. So the name may not be exactly the same, although all the words are there. Is it the case that if there is any discrepancy, it will not be treated as the proof of your identity? Thank you. Well, let me first talk about the spirit of the law, and I'll defer to the DOJ for details. Before issuing a ballot paper, it's not the case that when an identity document is produced, then the electoral officer will have to issue a ballot paper. The electoral officer will have to be satisfied that that person is actually the person on the final register. So there is a judgment call there. Mr. Lam talks about a minor difference. Paragraph 7B5 talks about 3 things. Mr. Chan, please speak into the microphone. So it's not just the passport. First, you will have to make a report to the police, and for the police to issue you a document showing the report, and a copy of your ID card, which acts as a corroboration, as well as your identity document. The 3 together will enable the electoral officer to make a judgment. So it's not the case that as long as you produce these documents, you will be issued a ballot paper.
DOJ? Well, apart from the name, the photocopy of the passport and also the ID also bears the photograph of the holder. So so if all these together do not cause any controversy, then it's admissible. So it's not that rigid. Chairman, for photographs, you know, recently there are a lot of media reports about differences between the real person and the photo, because there are guidelines for a most recent photo to be used, stipulated by different jurisdictions, but there are cases where the photo is hardly recognizable. It's not just passports alone. So if you allow the presiding officer to judge, well, the name is different and even the photo is different. Will a ballot paper be issued? I think the guideline itself is important. I just want to make it clear to ensure that an elector will not encounter any problem. I didn't specify a time limit, so it will be 5 minutes. A simple response from the Undersecretary first. So I note Mr. Jeffrey Lam's question, and Mr. Wong, our CEO, has also commented. In fact, in all polling stations, there are government lawyers present. So if there is any ambiguity, legal advisor will assist. This is to ensure that there is verification without jeopardizing a very important right of our electors, that is their voting right. So this is to exercise due diligence. There are 3 proofs, and a minor discrepancy will not affect the judgment. Mr. Lam Chuk-ting, thank you. First, I welcome the amendments because they can dispel some unnecessary misunderstanding. Looking at your timetable, you intend to amend the regulations to come into operation on the 1st of December 2017. However, in late November, you know, there are 2 by-elections in the Central and Western District. So prior to the amendments coming into operation, the old regulations apply. So in the old regulation, the ID or any identity proof showing the photo of the person concerned. I understand that now even with the name and also the photo, they may be identical to the elector, but people can have same names. So if there is someone who is a government officer, he has an identity proof with a photo, and he has shown you a document from issued by the government. I have lost my ID. I didn't have time to report to the police. I like to vote here. What will your approach? Mr. Wong can tell you our existing practice. The spirit is to verify your particulars on the FR, and that is your name and the ID number, and your face must tally with the photo shown on your identity proof. Now, if you come with a photocopy of the ID and also a home return permit, I think this is good enough. Under the current arrangements, you'll be given a ballot paper. Mr. Wong may want to supplement. Thank you. The current practice is in the LC report by the EAC, there are recommendations on what to do prior to the legislative amendments, because we can use internal guidelines to direct our PROs what to do when it comes to the production of an ID. So is the Hong Kong ID or the Hong Kong SR passport? But if a person fails to produce either, and if he can show a document of identity, such as an senior citizen card issued by the SWD plus a photocopy of his ID card, under the current practice, this is allowed. So we have internal guidelines Can you speak into the microphone, please? Please speak closer to the microphone. I understand that you have administrative guidelines to supplement loopholes in the legislation. But my question for the DOJ is, can administrative directives override legislative requirements? Mr. Chen, no, the answer is not that with an identity proof, you will automatically be granted a ballot paper. It's just that you have to produce a document to satisfy the PRO that you're the person on the FR before you can be given a ballot paper. So this is what is required in the law. As for recommendations or guidelines by the EACs, is just one of the criteria for the PRO to consider to satisfy that he is the person on the FR. So it's just one of the steps. Noted, if someone produce a document from the government and he has no other identity proof to show his picture and his particulars, and if the EAC doesn't allow him to vote, is there any legal risk? Because under the current legislation, he is fully entitled to vote. So why is the document not accepted unless it is fabricated? For instance, if we have a very high-profile government official and he is in that constituency, any supplement? The current regulation required that certain documents be examined to confirm that the person is really the person on the FR. No. What I mean is he has given you a document with his name, with his photo, and you should be satisfied. Can you please go for a second round, Mr. Yu Siwing? Thank you, Chairman. I welcome the new measures. I'd like to ask a question about the loss of ID card on the day of the election. Now, if he has lost all his documents, he has only got a document evidencing a report to a police officer, and he has no photocopy, because for some elderly persons, they don't really have a travel document. They only have an ID card. So is it true that he will be no longer entitled to vote on that day? Mr. Chen. We want to put down in the law the most convenient ways for electors. Now, in the FR, there is your ID number, so the production of an Hong Kong ID is the most convenient way. And what if the ID is lost? We propose alternative measures to prove a person's identity that can be accepted. For the case you mentioned, perhaps we may not be able to cater for that really. So publicity is important. The administration requires the EAC to step up publicity in this regard, so that the person concerned won't be in a position when he only discovers that he has lost his ID on the morning of the election. So when there are new measures, we have to let electors to get accustomed to it. Because if you have lost your ID card and you have not reported to the police, this is not really acceptable in law. No, he has already reported to a police. Usually, people would not report the loss of his ID to a police station before he goes to an election. Now, you want a photocopy of the ID card and a plus the original of travel document. What if he has no ID copy, he has no travel document? Is there any discretion? Because the law is currently too relaxed, and the flexibility allowed to PROs may be undesirable. So to save this problem for PROs, we are proposing these amendments. So long as a person finds out that he has lost his ID card on the morning before the election day, well, so long as the immigration department is still open, then he can go and apply for a replacement. No, but usually election takes place on a holiday. So I'm talking about the discovery on the day of the election. So we have to educate the public. They should not look for their ID cards only on the day of the election. Now we have a few millions people holding SAR passport in Hong Kong. We have hundreds of thousands with dog eye in Hong Kong. So if he has got none of these and he only discovers the loss of his ID on the morning of the election, well, we will have to educate the public to avoid this situation. So what about just the photocopy of the ID or the travel document? Can it be either? So it's either the photocopy or the SL passport, because many elderly persons will not keep a photocopy of his ID. Yes, I understand that members would like to have some flexibility, but Mr. Jeffrey Lam quoted a case where a person could only produce a passport issued by another jurisdiction, but then the name, well, it may contain a middle name, and the spelling or the presentation may be a bit different from the Hong Kong ID. So if there is no photo of an Hong Kong ID to prove his identity, the PRO is in a difficult position. I suggest that we try out the amendments first, and then next year we have by-elections, and if it is found that the situation is not too desirable, we can adjust it. So it is important to ask people to ensure that they have the Hong Kong ID. Please don't let them think that with the photo, with a copy of the Hong Kong ID, that would be sufficient, because this would be misleading. People may think that the copy of his Hong Kong ID is sufficient proof. In fact, everyone should carry his ID card when he goes out, and if it's lost, he should seek a replacement. And we should publicize this, ask people to check the availability of their ID right before the election, and then he can use an acknowledgement of application for the Hong Kong ID issued by the Immigration Department to prove his identity. Now, if after extensive publicity we still have problems, I think the administration will see what should be done. Mr. Holden Chow, I have two questions. First, now we understand that under the current practice, if you haven't got your Hong Kong ID, if you have a photo of it together with something like a senior citizen's card, that would be good enough for the PRO. This is the previous arrangement.
Well, from the document and the explanation of the official, I understand that without a photocopy of your ID card, it doesn't work. Safe and except that you can produce a document evidencing a report to a police officer, plus your home re-entry permit, plus your senior citizen card. Then you will be able to vote without a copy of your ID card. So I want to know whether it is right. Well, you have to prove that you have made a report to the police by producing the document evidencing a report plus, say for example, a senior citizen card. Another question I have is, well, A says that the original of that person's identity document. So, identity document. There is no other special definition, is that right? The LegCo brief says that in a footnote that identity document actually has got a definition under section 3 bracket 1 of the LegCo Council Ordinance stipulates that identity document means an identity card issued to a person under the Registration of Persons Ordinance. Does it mean that that is the only definition and there is no other definition? Thank you. Just first to reply to your second question. Right, there isn't a second definition. It is the definition under the LCO, Legislative Council Ordinance. And in footnote 1 of the LegCo brief, you see that that definition under the LCO is adopted. Save and except there is exceptional circumstances, say for example you are immobile and you can't even make an application. So basically it refers to your ID card. The first question, you want to confirm whether your understanding is right. You have made 2 points. First, whether the situation will change. Yes, it will change. Other than the identity card, if you have a home re-entry permit plus a copy of your ID card, well, in the future you will have to supplement your report document, or you produce the original of the acknowledgement of application for your ID card issued by the Immigration Department. In effect, it is a temporary Hong Kong ID card. Well, should it be the case that the Immigration Department is not open and you still want to go and vote, you can make a report to the police. The police will give you a report document and then you bring your home return permit plus the photocopy of your ID card. That will be the new arrangement. Any follow-up? No. I have a question to ask. Just now the Undersecretary said that after the amendment you will promulgate guideline to the ERO, to the REO. There are lots of elderly voters. They live in residential care homes for the elderly. Usually it will be the care home that keeps the inmates, the person's identity card. So what publicity will you do? Can the REO tell us that when the proposed amendment comes into effect, the voting rights of elderly people will not be deprived of? Those who stay in homes, they need help to go to the polling station, and if you require them to make a report of the loss of their identity card, then it is not desirable. So what publicity campaign can you mount to address this inadequacy? Well, we have APIs. course, that will be done. Well, I will propose or ask the REO to consider what you have said, Chairman. We have information about RCHEs, say for example, how many there are in Hong Kong. We will talk to the REO to come up with an arrangement. Perhaps we will remind the person in charge of homes that they will have to put in place supporting arrangements when it comes to the identity card of voters living in homes. I will see if Mr. Wong has anything to add. Of course, we will conduct standing publicity campaign. We will emphasize on the fact that voters will have to bring with them their identity card, the original of it, to go to vote. In relation to residential care homes, before the election, we will send letters to these homes to remind them of guidelines of elections. When we send letters to homes, we will send the relevant message to these homes to draw their attention to the new amendments. So you mentioned about the existing clean election guideline. If you incorporate this as one of the terms, people may not pay attention to it. I do think you need to do a bit more. Your APIs may have to highlight this point, because this has changed. This may be related to relatives of elderly people, not just those living in RCHEs. If a lot of people lose their right to vote as a result of this, it is not ideal. Next, Ms. Elena Wong. I support the amendments, but I have some questions to ask. So you bring with you your Hong Kong ID card, you will be given a ballot paper. And if they bring the photocopy of the ID card and a Hong Kong SAR passport, that also works. What if the voter only brings with them a home re-entry permit? That would not work. Save and accept that they have produced documents, that they have reported a loss, or they have made an application for a replacement. Then they will be able to obtain the ballot paper. Home re-entry permit alone will not enable them to obtain ballot paper. Is that right? That is right. What about the existing arrangement? Well, as it was explained by the Undersecretary, you don't automatically get a ballot paper when you produce your identity document. The presiding officer will have to make a judgment call as to whether they are satisfied that you are actually the person on the final register. So you need to produce identity documents showing your name and a photograph of the voter. As a result of this unclear arrangement, people may have the perception that there is no equal treatment, because how it's handled may vary from polling station to polling station. At the moment, the onus is on the presiding officer. We propose to make changes to make things easier, because your identity card suffices. The original of the acknowledgement of the application for ID card from the Immigration Department works. If not, then you need a document evidencing a report to the police plus a photocopy and, say, for example, your home re-entry permit. Home re-entry permit alone does not suffice. Ms. Starry Lee, I want to ask, in the past, it was quite laxed. What was the rationale? And now? You refer to a report saying that there are 2 cases in which 2 people produced merely their photocopies of the ID card when they were given ballot papers, and then you said that it was clarified that that was not the case. So what is the rationale of these changes? You said that there are media reports about 2 electors, but then you clarify that that actually is not the case. Then what is the point of making these amendments? I will defer to the Chief Electoral Officer for further information. Well, the 2 cases, they have happened. The EAC thought that in one of the cases, a ballot paper was distributed, and that is not ideal. Voter produced only a photocopy of the Hong Kong ID card and was able to collect a ballot paper. The EAC is of the view that that is not right. That's what it meant. It's not that it was not substantiated. And these 2 incidents trigger discussions. Well, what effect do we want to achieve? Of course, we want a clean and fair election. And when it comes to implementation, it has to be something that facilitates voting. And it should be conducive to encourage people to vote. I remember several elections ago, we have received a notice from the EAC. Well, a lot of voters still think that they need to bring with them the notice to vote sent to them by the REO. Well, the notice is to inform you where you should go to cast your vote. The notice does not replace your identity document. We are talking about something important. Millions of voters exercising their right to vote in half a day's time. So the fundamental of our consideration of making these changes is to facilitate voting. We don't want to complicate matters. We don't want voters to be more confused as to what they need to bring with them. Yes, the presiding officer is clear that with an identity card, and then a ballot paper will be issued. However, well, I have heard about a lot of cases about families. Say, for example, sons forbidding mothers to vote and mothers criticizing sons for voting in a certain way.
Have you considered the possibility that for the sake of security, an elderly person's ID card is not kept by himself or by the RCG and is not against the law? And if it can be proved that he has lived there, that is already sufficient. If for various reasons he may not be able to get his ID card, for instance, is kept by his son who lives far away and he may not be able to vote. Have you considered this? No. Well, a person detaining another person's ID is against the law. Well, so publicity is very important, and the responsibility rests on the government. And I thank the reminder from the chairman that in terms of publicity, we cannot just treat it as something routine. And this is a new arrangement, and all electors have to get used to it. If in the past a person could vote using a copy of his ID and he cannot do so this time, is a big issue. Mr. Paul Zhe, I'd like to respond to what Ms. Starley said. I think I share her sentiments. Recently, perhaps because of memory issue, Ms. Pak's idea is always with me. So detaining an ID of another person is against the law, but a son, an elderly person may not sue his son for that. So the administration intends to amend the law to make it easier for you to work, but I think you have overlooked the voting rights of electors. So I have a technical question to ask anyway. Why do you have to be so harsh to people who have lost his ID card and has reported to the police? I think if he has got a document showing the report to the police, and you require the regional of travel document as well as a copy of his ID card, you will want a copy of his ID. How many people will be so cautious as to have taken a copy of his ID? So why do you have to be so harsh? If you make a false report to the police, it is a criminal offense. So report to the police is already quite stringent. Why do you want the original of a travel document plus a copy of his ID? Is it asking for too much? Is it superfluous? As regards the document of the ID, you claim that you have already sorted out, but I don't think so, unless you're going to amend Cap 51D, the definition there, because if you do not amend that section, then what is meant by any other issue to a person that is acceptable to the ERO as proof of the person's identity? Why must it be regional of the ID? But if you look at the LC Ordinance, it says that any other document that is acceptable to the ERO is sufficient. So unless you repeal Section 2Z of 541D, otherwise there is still a loophole, because under this ordinance, other document is acceptable. And in your regional or in your LC ordinance, you still use it as the definition. All right, I'll talk about the policy considerations, and I will defer to the DOJ for the legal details. So, can you ask our technician to tune up the output for Mr. Chen? All right, I'll speak closer to the microphone. First, the production of three things to prove his identity. Yes, for a person who's lost his ID card and reported to the police. Now, if you've lost your ID card, you can do two things. The most direct thing to do is to apply for a replacement from the Immigration Department, then you don't have to report to the police. There is no requirement from the Immigration Department for you to report to a police first. So, so if you have acknowledgement of application for replacement from the Immigration Department, that's sufficient. But what about before that has been done? Well, this is in fact a so-called fallback position. If you've lost the opportunity to apply for a replacement from the Immigration Department, you only found out that you have lost it on the morning of the election day, then you resort to B5. So it's not that you have to produce 3 things before you can vote as soon as you've lost your ID, but this is superfluous. A regional of the passport and that ID copy and proof that you've reported to the police. All right. Reporting to the police, you know, there is a document to show that you have made a report. Second, a travel document, and that is not the Hong Kong SAR passport. That is passport issued by another jurisdiction, and also or a home return permit. When Mr. Jeffrey Lam asked the question, you were not here. No, I was here. All right. The particulars on the passport may not be the same as the name shown on the ID, because you must have the copy of the proof. Well, if he has the SAR passport, then he can report. All right, and travel documents issued by another jurisdiction, that's understandable, but you still require a proof, a copy of the ID. Because with the copy of the ID number shown can be checked against what's on the file. And home return permit is also got that number. So there is a way out. The intention is not to deter people, and so is there any way out when a person is in that position? And we have this proposal, and it's accepted by the EAC. Ms. Eunice Yong, I support this. But I think 7B5 is too harsh. Not many people maintain a copy of his ID. So you talked about a similar travel document. What about an overseas driving license? The name as well as the photo is there. So can a driving license be regarded as a travel document? A driving license is not usually a travel document, so it must be a travel document for traveling. Well, you talk about someone with a foreign passport, and it can also be the home return permit. That is, we have to package it to the most serious travel document. And as for copy of a person's ID, not everyone will carry one with him, but it's all about publicity. I think only a very limited number of persons will be affected by this amendment. In fact, next year there will be by-elections, and we will review the effectiveness of the amended regulations. If there are complaints and if political parties do not find it desirable, we will review the arrangement at once, and EAC, of course, conduct its own review, and the Commission will note comments from the public. The recommendation by EAC this time is to tighten up the rules. Will it be regarded too strict? I think after the by-elections next year, it would be opportune for us to make an other review, and if amendments are needed, we will review the situation. What if a person really cannot produce a physical copy of his ID? If it is shown on his phone, if he can produce an image of his ID on his mobile phone, can that be accepted? I think these are operational matters, because the requirement is very strict. According to this paragraph, it must be a hard copy of his ID. Well, Hong Kong is a very convenient place. Photocopiers are very common. It's easy to find a copy, find one, and even stationery shops have got these. So I just want you to be more comprehensive. I think it says a copy in paper form. Whether the photocopying has to be done through a photocopier or via a mobile phone, I don't think that matters. All right, Mr. Riley, Mr. Oden Chow, Mr. Porter, and myself. 3 minutes. Mr. Riley, I'd like to follow up with my previous question. I agree with Mr. Porter that we have to strike a right balance. And you said that it is against the law to ban a certain person from voting. I'm not too comfortable with that. You know, we talk about many elderly persons, for whatever reasons, have kept their ID at the most secure place. Many people do not regard voting as a big thing, and they may not have the awareness to acquire their ID. Now, what if on the day of the election, his ID is kept by a relative who's out of town on that day? So now if he has got a senior citizen's card plus a notification for voting, is that allowed? Because I've observed many elderly in the community who just go out with a senior citizen card with him. So you ask him to sue his or her daughter. It's not really true. So well, it's not about whether it is against the law. Yes, I do understand that elderly have their own habits, or we respect them. We want them to come out to vote as far as possible, and we should not put in too many hurdles for them. I think it is already required by law that a person should carry his ID card with him. So for an ID, it shouldn't be the case that he will only have his ID when he goes out to vote on that day. Well, you talked about the law. Already the law is enforced, but many elderly persons do not have their IDs with them, and sometimes I do that, and yet it is already allowed in the law. And you come back to the answer that it is required by law that everyone carries his ID with him when he goes out. So can you add this, that when there are real and reasonable difficulties, and other proof of identity is allowed? Because it may not be intentional, it's just that the ID is not easily available. So unless you say that before an election day, everyone has to get hold of his ID, otherwise it's an offense. Because a person may tell the PRO that his ID is with his son and he has to work and he cannot get hold of it on that day.
And then you said that, well, it is the law to bring your Hong Kong ID card with you, but people don't bring their Hong Kong ID card with them. We're talking about striking a balance. The government has undertaken to step up their publicity campaign. We have heard the same from the REO. Well, once it becomes a habit, then there won't be any problems. And I have also undertaken to conduct a review after the first election, after the next election. Well, if you say that despite large-scale publicity campaign is still considered overly restrictive, then we will come back to fine-tune it. Well, but we don't have to go to the other extreme as to flouting the law just to make it easy. No, but that's not what I meant. But these things happen. Well, elderly people won't tell you that that is the case. They simply don't turn up on polling day. But you said that there are 2 electors who were able to collect ballot papers with just their photocopies of their ID card. But then you said that that is actually not the case. You have not explained what actually has been happening. And you just talked to me about supporting measures and stepping up publicity campaign. I have heard the member. It is normal for members to be concerned. We have made undertakings when it comes to education, public education and publicity. Well, if you encounter operational difficulties, you talk to us and then we will review the situation. Mr. Holden Chow. Well, I just talk about the definition under Cap 541D. You said that the same definition is adopted. I myself and Mr. Paul there want to ask about this legal point. Under the law, it says A, B, and C. C says any other document issued to a person that is acceptable to the electoral registration officer as proof of the person's identity. Using the same definition, then one can still produce other document that is acceptable to the electoral registration officer. Shall we hear from the DOJ? There is a clear definition under the LegCo Ordinance, and there has never been any cases of operational difficulties. That's why, for sake of simplicity, we adopt the same definition. And as to your proposal, let's hear from the DOJ. The instructions we have received is to adopt the definition under Cap 541D, which we find three different definitions, A, B, and C. Well, in practice, there is no other document issued to a person that is acceptable to the electoral registration officer other than A and B. I'll defer to the REO. Well, C doesn't mean that the presiding officer can accept any other document. It's just that when someone registers as a voter, well, only the identity card number is required, but no other document. So when one registers as a voter, well, you won't encounter a circumstance under which one is one can produce other document. So we're talking about two different things. One is what you need to produce on polling day. The other one is about what you need to produce when you register as a voter. Well, it says that, it says that, the person will have to produce one's identity document. The definition of identity document under Section 3 bracket 1 of the LCO A, B, and C. And Mr. Zhe and I have both spotted this problem, and I'm sure he will ask. And I heard a different answer earlier. You've used up your time. You will have to wait for the next round. Mr. Zhe. I don't agree with the answer of the DOJ because he simply passed the buck to kick the ball to the court of the REO. It's not about registering as a voter. It's about when you appear at a polling station, you have to study it very carefully. Otherwise, you will attract judicial review. Just now, the Undersecretary said that let's try it out. If it's too restrictive, then you will make adjustments. But it's just like when you are when you're trying to open a safe, you will slowly move towards the right combination, step by step. Well, you might not have handled a safe before, but let me tell you that when you move towards the right combination, you will do it slower and slower. You have not considered people like elderly people or people who are absent-minded. Elderly people don't carry with them their identity card. What is true is that elderly people let their children keep the identity card. And their children may not work in Hong Kong. Well, is it the case that legislators through electors are able to vote with simply photocopies of their ID, and that's why you want to do something? I think you are completely divorced from reality, and you can't just try things out and then fine tune it and then try some more and then fine tune it. That is not the right way. And you failed to answer my question in relation to the legal point. And I do find that the approach of the DOJ is rather careless. You want to wait for a judicial review application before you actually do something, Undersecretary. Well, I think when it comes to photocopies of the ID card, the policy intent is very clear. And we need to use the right legal framework to express clearly the policy intent. We will go back to consider it further in view of your concern. And I think in essence you ask, can it simply state identity card? We will go back to look into it. The second question. Well, I do understand that we have finding the balance is a very delicate exercise. When one does not have the identity card with them, what alternative arrangements can be put in place? You mentioned about photocopies. And also, members, if you about a photocopy of ID card and senior citizen card. We will talk to the REO. We'll try to find a better balance. But I don't see any problem with this original proposal. A number of members insist on this point. And I would like to say that Mr. Jeffrey Lam's point is a very valid point. Well, if we allow different forms of identity document, we need to have a basis. One's ID card number appears in the final register. And if you say, let's dispense with the copy of the ID card, then how can a presiding officer strike the right balance when it comes to confirming the voter's identity? I have a question. I thought it was a simple matter, but I have been concerned, especially when it comes to elderly people. We have an aging population and an increasing number of elderly citizens. I actually have encountered a number of cases. It is difficult to require elderly citizens to carry the identity card with them. The Undersecretary talks about the law requiring one to carry one's identity card. It's actually easier said than done. And you refer to cases of voters producing just their photocopies of their ID card. Well, and do you have the figures of cases when people are given ballot papers when they have produced some other forms of identity document other than a Hong Kong ID card? We have not kept any exact data. We have a considerable number of presiding officers in every election. According to that recollection, the majority of voters use their Hong Kong ID card to vote. And as to the others, what documents they have used, we have not kept any data. So there are two cases. And that's the basis of your proposed amendment. Well, what I see is that there should not be any loophole, and there should be facilitation to voters. Say, for example, well, in some countries, they will affix on your skin a chalk with ink that can't be washed away. Simple as that. If you tighten your measures for the sake of tightening it, and as a result some people can't vote, it is not ideal. The Undersecretary said that he would go back to look into it. I'm concerned. What is the way forward? I thought it was going to be simple. Well, I don't know if the Undersecretary has anything else to say. Will people lose the right to vote as a result? Have you made any assessment? Well, I already said that we will go back to look into it, so there is no need for us to have an in-depth discussion on this matter. And that is the whole point of scrutiny of the regulations.
I will see whether there is any need to improve the amendments. Two members, third round, Mr. Starry and Mr. Oden Chow. Ms. Starry, 3 minutes. Yes. Well, the Undersecretary promised to reconsider this. I hope you will not come to a conclusion too soon. Yes, what you propose here may be most convenient for your PROs, but it is not really grounded, because even elderly persons living at home do not carry their IDs when they go out, I don't know whether they will all be arrested by the police. And secondly, I think the CE does care about our aging community. So many elderly persons don't want to carry their IDs with them, not to break the law, but to put them, to ensure that they're in a secure place. So you say here that in your paper that there are at least 2 such cases, and then you want to amend the law. This is not good enough. Of course, you want to plug the loopholes. You want to verify the identity of electors. It's hard for us to oppose such intentions. But then the current practice has been in place for so many years. And so far, you've only got 2 cases. And for other cases, you could confirm the identity of electors. Why do you say that it is so difficult? So if a person has got his ID photocopy, and if he has other proofs, why can't you allow them to vote? But you promised to reconsider the amendments. Yes, I note Ms. Sari Lee's comments. I have nothing more to add. Mr. Holden Chow, the 3rd round. Thank you, Chairman. I just want to add one point regarding the definition of ID. Now, Mr. Chen told us that the definition is in accordance with Section 3.1 of the LC Ordinance, and I am more assured, because in C of that section it says any other document issued to a person that is acceptable to the ERO as proof of the person's identity. I think we'll be more assured, because this is possible leeway. And if all of a sudden you tell us that you do not go by the definition in the LC Ordinance, then I'm very worried. I understand that Mr. Chen is going to reconsider the administration's position, but please do not our comments. You have to take care of the needs of some electors when it comes to operation. For instance, some elderly persons do not carry their IDs with them as they go out. Now, if indeed you're going to follow the definition under Section 3.1 of the LC Ordinance, you go by the spirit of that definition, then we are a bit assured, because there is room to maneuver. That is, Mr. Tse, because did you have any comments on this? That is the definition of ID. Mr. Chow? Well, I asked a question on this, and at first you told us that you would follow the meaning assigned to it by Section 3.1 of the LC Ordinance. There are 3 limbs, A, B, C, and C says any other document issued to a person that is acceptable to the ERO as proof of the person's identity. So that means a senior citizen's card may be sufficient if you adopt this definition. Now, if you stick to the spirit of this meaning, if not the letter, then if you allow a person to produce his original home return permit, then I think you can then lay out concerns. Mr. Porter, now if I could answer your question, I might as well be the Secretary for Justice. Mr. Holden Charles said that he is happy because there is still discretion. Then what's the point of amending the regulation? because if we use the definition of the LC ordinance, we can challenge you already, because you will be in breach of Section 3(1)(c) here. I don't want to put you in a difficult position, but I just think that your amendment must be tidy and clear-cut. You want to amend, you want to give consideration to our comments, but it's by negative vetting. There is nothing we can do. So I hear your goodwill. You promise to review it, but I'd like to know whether you will really amend the proposals here, or you wait for the coming by-elections to be a guinea pig and only amend afterwards. If you've been to the community, if you understand the situation of the elderly, you won't say this, because many elderly persons will be disqualified. Perhaps there are political considerations. The Pan-Democrats may think that the amendment is to their advantage, and for the establishment camp, they may think that the elderly persons are their hardcore supporters. Well, in other places, true, driving license acceptable. In Hong Kong, we are over meticulous. I always said that there is no need for voter registration, because an ID, our ID would suffice. Now, if you want to amend the arrangements because of the two complaints, then the amendment should really be minor. Now, please don't think that you are here to satisfy me. In fact, what I intend to do is to tidy up your amendment so that you don't have to go back and forth. Please don't think that publicity is good enough. But if you amend the if your amendments are too drastic, then you have to do another round of publicity. You will damage the reputation of the DOJ. Thank you very much. I do understand it, and I thank Mr. Tse for joining the BC to show your concern over the matter. So we have heard members' comments. We will go back and analyze the situation. We have to discuss with the EAC because it is the EAC that is amending is regulations, is subsidiary legislation. So we have to discuss with the EAC first. If we do agree that some minor adjustments are needed, we will come back to report to the BC, and if our conclusion is the proposals here are in order, we will still have to apply to you, to report to you. So if we have a new proposal, we'll come back to explain to you, and if after consideration we still consider the current proposal desirable, we will come back and also explain to you. So any further questions in relation to the administration's explanation? Now, technically, we've already passed the negative vetting period deadline. Am I correct? I intended to extend the scrutiny period at the next sitting. That means, can we still amend the legislation? Secretary, at the last meeting, members agreed that the chairman would extend the scrutiny period to the 8th of November. The 8th of November. And the deadline for giving notice to amend the legislation is the 1st of November. Because if the extension is successful, then the deadline for scrutiny is the 8th of November. The deadline for giving notice of amendment is the 1st of the month. I intended to go into the clause-by-clause scrutiny, but then since members have made so many comments and the government has yet to respond to them, I don't know whether the administration will amend the regulations themselves. Because if we do a clause-by-clause scrutiny now and the administration proposes amendments next time, that would make our efforts abortive. Well, not all provisions are controversial. So if members would like to examine the clauses now, it's fine. If you want to rather defer, I'm fine. I'm inclined to wait till the next time. We've only got 20 minutes left, but I have until 12:45 for the meeting. Ms. Holden Chow. Since many members have expressed our views, and the Undersecretary said that he needed time to consider our comments to see whether our views can be incorporated. So I think we should wait until the next time. That may be more desirable. That will allow him time. Well, 10 members indicated only 3 members indicated their intention to attend a meeting, but in fact many of us have turned up. This is to show our concern for the legislation. So I think we wait until the next time. After all, the clauses are not technical. All right. The Secretary has proposed 4:30, the 16th of October. The 11th is Wednesday. 4:30. But that would clash with the Health Services Panel's briefing on PA.
Okay.
All right. Is it agreeable to members? May I suggest that after the meeting we make another time with the Secretary, because the EAC is also involved, and I don't know whether we can come back in a week. So can we liaise with the Secretary afterwards? All right, that's the preliminary arrangement. If need be, we can seek another. We can defer the meeting because we have to apply to the Council for an extension. Yes, I do think we should examine the clauses now because we don't know what is the final outcome. All right, if members have no further questions, we end our meeting here. So tentatively, the next meeting is scheduled for the 16th, but we are not sure now.